So, yes, functions of a client nation, a civil government, and policies based on the laws of divine establishment. Why do you need the laws of divine establishment? There has to be the function of morality. Morality is a good thing when it's put in its proper place. Morality is necessary for there to be freedom, respect for privacy, respect for property, respect the sanctity of human life. And as a result, no, I'm not talking about pro-life movement. I'm not talking about going against abortion. People always confuse these things, and pro-life will distract you. I'm not talking about you going out there and getting involved and becoming anti-abortion. I'm not saying that at all. Be careful. You're going to become distracted if you join the pro-life or get any of those ideas. Here I'm talking about the respect for human life. B. The function of evangelism under the principle of freedom. Why must there be establishment or freedom? Because if there's no freedom, then evangelism cannot occur. You'll be arrested. Who is this guy preaching this Christianity or something? If you're lived in a communist country, then many times you become arrested. China still represses a lot of its Christians. The USSR repressed still a lot of the Christian population, and whatever Christians were supposedly there, very faithful, a lot of them were just KGB agents back in the Cold War eras. So when Billy Graham went over there and said, "Why? Look at the great Christian population that's on fire," a lot of them were KGB agents. And like Billy Graham just ate it all. Typical for us Christians to just be so naive, and we fall for whatever schemes people bring up or whatever facades that they put in front of us. We just eat them up because we want to believe people. We think that just because we have some sort of virtue, they also must have some sort of virtue. You see, the Bible gives you people smarts, and you become very intelligent and at the same time, cynical. Cynicism without bitterness, obviously. And there's no bitterness that you cannot become bitter. There's such thing as becoming cynical and at the same time having impersonal love. Well, let me not go there. See, the establishment of local autonomous churches, separated from the state and separate from big church spheres of influence. So there has to be autonomous little local churches that teach doctrine. They have to be separated from the state. No such thing as the union of church and state. No such things as the Church of England. No such thing as the Catholic Church controlling the state and having so much power over all the states as it did in the Middle Ages. And these local churches have to be separate. There has to be freedom. And as well, you have to be separated from big church spheres of influence. The Baptists trying to join together into a big whole Baptist movement, and all these new churches getting into big movements and having little sites, micro sites, as some church calls it. A little church here, a little church there, all under the big mother church. And you're just copying the Catholic Church when you're doing that. So you can criticize the Catholic Church all you want, but look, the Baptists are doing the same thing. And other types of that ilk. The function, D, the function of vigorous and dynamic Bible teaching so that believers can grow on the plan of God all the way to spiritual maturity. So there has to be Bible teaching, meaning that the pastors have to be studying, and teaching, not getting involved, not becoming do-gooders, not visiting people to the church, visiting people at hospitals and all that stuff, which is a wonderful thing, but that's the stuff that your church, your flock has to be doing, not you as a pastor. You as a pastor, you're supposed to be preparing them to advance all the way to spiritual maturity, and then perhaps they can function in their own spiritual gift and be doing all these great things. But not you, pastor. That's the type of arrogance of the pastors, that they want to be doing everything. They want to be right there involved. First of all, they want to give the sermon, and then they want to be involved in this ministry in the church, and then that ministry. They want to be right there playing the piano, and they want to be over there involved in this outreach program. You know, pastors, sit your ass down and start learning some Bible doctrine. Look at your cheap teaching. That's the reason why your congregation is perishing. That's the reason why you're all do-gooders, because you have nothing, no content inside of your soul, and therefore you have to compensate by means of good works. Okay, let's continue. E, as a result, missionary activity to other nations without interfering in their affairs. So there has to be those missionaries that are sent to other nations, other countries, both evangelists and pastors. And once you make many converts in that area, you have to train the local population. You have to detect those who have the gift of pastor teacher and train them so that they can teach their own people. Don't stay there and start building building hospitals, building schools, building this and building that. The important thing is to start teaching. And let all the stuff that I just mentioned be a result of the Bible teaching. Don't put the cart before the horse. And then F, the provision of a safe haven to the Jews. There has to be a safe haven to Jews all the time. Jews are always persecuted. And as a result, the client nation has to give them a safe haven. There's no such thing as a client nation in this dispensation. We are living in the times of the Gentiles, and therefore the Jews are still under the fifth cycle of discipline, which means that if there's a bundle of Jews scattering, heading towards your country, you better receive them and give them a safe haven, protect them. If they're going to prosper, if they're going to become bankers or whatever, let them give them their freedom, protect them. Point 4, it's the requirement for the preservation of the client nation status is the pivot of mature believers. So this is the requirement for a nation to continue being a client nation, and that is the pivot of mature believers. Here's a little pivot, and there has to be plenty of mature believers. I don't know, at least 5% of all the Christian population in that country has to be mature, having arrived at least at gate 5 of the divine power sphere, and a lot of them in gate 8 of the divine power sphere. Those Christians might not use such terms as divine power sphere. Their own pastor has to come up with their own terminology to explain the same concept, but they still understand the doctrine with a different name. Okay, so that's the requirement. Apostate and reversionistic believers do not make the pivot but become part of the spinoff. So here's this country right here. Let's put it bigger, like that. And here's a cluster of mature believers, and the rest are all reversionistic believers. Let's make this look nasty because reversionistic believers are nasty. Some of the worst people in the world are believers who are apostate and reversionistic, those self-righteous Christians. This looks pretty ugly, right? Okay, I've illustrated my point. This looks pretty? Okay, yes, I've illustrated my point. This is the pivot. The rest, all the other ones who are not mature, this is the spin-off. And when the spin-off becomes too great and the pivot becomes too small, this is when the first cycle of discipline occurs, then the second, and then the third, and then the fourth. And if they do not listen, they do not use 1 John 1:9 and start learning doctrine so as to recover from their apostasy, then the fifth cycle of discipline comes. A foreign country comes in, takes them, conquers them. A nation always destroys themselves internally before an external country destroys them. Just remember that. A nation, a country, a kingdom, an empire always destroys itself internally first before an external entity, an external military invades them and conquers them. And for us, for the client nation, we Christians, we're the ones who are in charge, not in charge, we're responsible rather. We're the ones that are responsible for the condition of our country, socially, militarily, economically. What? Yes. So you cannot blame at the end of the day all the socialists around. You cannot blame the MAGA types around. You can blame yourself, because if you're not advancing in the plan of God, it is your fault. It is my fault. Yes, all those Christians that are given into MAGA, they're at fault too, because instead of advancing in the plan of God, they're given into a whack dictator type known as, that guy. I don't want to mention his name, but yeah, the MAGA types. Celebrating Charlie Kirk's death as if he was some sort of spiritual giant. He died the sin unto death. It wasn't public, but it was a conspiracy and all that. It could be a conspiracy, it could be this, it could be that. But at the end of the day, he died the sin unto death, and God allowed it. How about that? Dying the sin unto death in front of the whole world. I'm not gloating, but that's a doctrinal reality. Our country's going down. There's very few mature believers right now. This is the United States. The spinoff is great. It looks like this. And there's only a few mature believers, but there's hope because you are here right now, learning Bible doctrine. And you might include yourself in the cluster, and that's that pivot of mature believers. Excuse me. Does it help you see it this way? Here's you individually. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3. In Phase 1, you had to adjust to the justice of God. How? Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, and then as a result, you got the imputed righteousness of God. You adjusted to 1/2 of divine holiness plus R. So that means that you've adjusted yourself to the justice of God, and therefore the justice of God blesses you with the whole salvation package. If you don't adjust to the justice of God, the justice of God is going to adjust to you through punitive action, but that's not the case here because you did believe and now you have the plus R. If you were still minus R as an unbeliever, then yes, the justice of God would adjust to you. Okay, Phase 2, the justice of God continues being the point of contact. And how do you adjust to the justice of God in Phase 2? By using rebound. When you use rebound, you're adjusted to the justice of God. Either you're in or you're out. And so you're adjusted to the justice of God. The justice of God blesses you at that moment. Fellowship. And then you keep doing that, keep doing that, keep doing that, keep doing that, and you reach maturity. You finally adjust it to the justice of God at maturity. But what if you do not make these adjustments? And what if you don't use 1 John 1:9 with the result that you're not adjusted to the justice of God even though you already are a believer? The justice of God adjusts to you through punitive action. All right, do you understand this? Now, put it in a collective sense. There is such a thing as this concept in the collective sense. So you have all these types not adjusted to the justice of God, not adjusted. They're believers, by the way. We're only talking about believers right now. Believers not adjusted to the justice of God. Not, all of them not adjusted to the justice of God. As a result, the justice of God is going to have to adjust to us collectively as a client nation through punitive action, also known as the 5 cycles of discipline. Okay. When the spin-off of believers becomes too great, collective punitive action from the justice of God is required. Either 1, to preserve the nation by eliminating the spin-off through the first 4 cycles of discipline, Leviticus 26, verses 14 to 26, Deuteronomy 28. Or 2, to remove the nation entirely through the 5th cycle of discipline, Leviticus 26, verses 27 to 39. In other words, if the spin-off becomes too great, there is still hope, so to speak, in the sense that there's going to be great punishment to remove a lot of the spin-off. And through that suffering, as a result, perhaps some of those believers who were part of the spin-off, they start using 1 John 1 and start learning doctrine, and they're on their way to maturity. And many other ones that were wiped out, dead, killed. So that suffering killed a lot of people. And so, yes, this could be the preservation of the client nation by wiping out a whole lot of the population of reversionists, and in turn, also some of those survivors become mature believers. That can happen. Or the second one, just the client nation entirely is removed, and only those faithful ones, that pivot, is taken out safely to go to the next client nation or somewhere else. This is seen all throughout the Bible, so do not think that this is just a made-up doctrine. Sometimes we think that's, he's just making it. He has a great imagination. No, I do have a great imagination, but the Bible has much better doctrines than my imagination can ever ideate or whatever. Now, let's continue. Point 5, the principle of the pivot is illustrated in, boom, we need more verses here. This is just the beginning. I mentioned that this is a doctrine in process, but I'll finish it. Romans 11 verses 3 to 5 compared to 1 Kings chapter 19 verses 11 to 18. Do you recall this verse? 1 Kings chapter 19 verse 11. Let's look at this one really quick. 1 Kings chapter 9. I don't have to go over all the verses today. 1 Kings 19:11. This is the passage where Isaiah, he just killed all those prophets from Baal. He had a moment of success. He got over too high, too full of himself, and as a result, he killed all the prophets of Baal. Jezebel, who was the wife of Ahab at that time, King Ahab, she found out about this, and she said that she was going to kill him. He became so full of fear, and he started running and running and running some more. And so, and 1 Kings chapter 19:11, chapter 19, Elijah was too full of himself. He says, only I am left. What am I going to do? Only I am left. What are you doing here, Elijah? Verse 10, he says, replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, tore down your altars, and put the prophets to death. And only I am the only one left. And now they are trying to kill me too. And so this is where the Lord gave him a demonstration.